good morning, everybody, and welcome to the WLBB Community Voice Program. Our show brought to you by Tanner Health System. It is Friday. It is 8:30. I'm your host, Colin Worthington. My guests, if you're watching us on Facebook Live, which you can this morning, the News Talk 1330 WLBB Facebook page, you'll see that we have a studio full of guests this morning, and I'll introduce them all to you here in just a second. They are with the Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum. They have a new exhibit coming up, I believe, in about a week, right? And we'll talk about the current exhibit a little bit and encourage you to go out there and enjoy that and talk about the new exhibit as well as a handful of other fun things. Guests this morning that are with us, we've got Marlyn, we've got Cyndi, and then sitting kind of in the back there, we've got Ginny, Jane, and Sarah, and we'll talk to each of them, I believe, at some point during this program. We also have about 52 quilts that we're going to try and show off on our other camera, and we'll get the stories behind those quilts, because as we were talking before the program, like with a new exhibit that's coming up, or maybe it's the ongoing exhibit, yeah, I mean, a very interesting story with one of those quilts, and I'm sure it's probably equal with all the quilts that come through. But first of all, let us reintroduce the Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum. I think 4 or 5 years it's been open. I remember doing a show when it first opened up, and I don't believe we've had you ladies out here since then.
Right.
So let's revisit this. I figure people who live here in the region may not. Oh, it's something I can go see any other time because it's here. But yeah, tell us about it. And it does have changing exhibits.
Right. Do you want to start, Cyndi?
Yes. The Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum, if in case you're not familiar with it, is located at 306 Bradley Street, which is just down the hill from the AMP. We're open Thursday through Saturday from 10 to 4, and we have a gift shop associated with it that is open those same hours. The museum purpose is to preserve the past, to recognize quilts in the current environment, and to educate for the future.
Now, did everybody who was participating in this quilt museum, did they all believe that the quilts and the history of quilts was a big deal? Were they just fan of quilts, or did you realize how, there are other museums? So this is just the Southeastern one. So there's at least 3 other, I'm guessing, and the national one.
More. There are
Right,
more
there's
than
more.
that. But at the National Quilt Museum in Paducah, Kentucky, they only exhibit quilts from the 1970s forward because people thought quilting was a dying art, and they thought it was going to be lost. But in the 70s, there was an enormous revival, and people began making new fabrics and new ideas, and they only showed those generally at Paducah. So we decided it's important to us, too, to preserve the past in those quilts. And we are such an area where there's been so many textiles, and we're one of the largest cotton-producing counties in the state at one time. We just have too much history to ignore that phase of quilting.
So we think about that history. Did you guys have to compete a lot with maybe Dalton and even down to Bremen and down to Columbus as far as bringing this museum here, or was it just the idea?
No,
It was like, hey,
the Georgia Quilt Council actually selected Carrollton over almost 25 years ago.
Wow. It's been a long time.
But it took a while to get the doors open. But once we got up and running, it'll be 6 years this September.
Well, good.
We have been real excited. Things are zooming along, but those who don't come often are missing a lot of treats, we think.
And as you explained to me so clearly, I appreciate that, ladies, out in the lobby here. There's things to see. It's not just a one-time visit. I mean, there's exhibits that are changing. So just because you come one time and spend your $5, you might as well spend the $35 on a season pass.
There you go.
Exactly. Yeah, we have 3 to 4 exhibits every year. Most of them are quilt related. Some modern, some
textiles.
Historical quilts, and about every 2 years we try to have an exhibit that relates specifically to textiles. That is part of our name and part of our heritage.
The last textile exhibit was a chenille exhibit, and it was great fun. 98% of all the chenille that was ever produced was produced in Georgia.
Do you think this museum, is it making Carrollton a destination, or maybe if somebody's going to Florida, they know they want to stop at Carrollton because they are just a big fan of quilts, or are we getting more people in there that are just in Carrollton, visiting family?
We feel they're coming to see the exhibit. Plus, of course, they're coming to see family related. But let me give you an example. The first 2 days this current exhibit was open, Sacred Threads, we had 36 people come to the museum from 8 different states. We were shocked, too. We are thrilled. I mean, yesterday, one lady came in from Chicago and said, "Oh, I was in the area doing some work, so I thought on the way to the airport I would
Way
just
those
come
Chicago
by."
people talk. Oh, my
Oh, I love it. I know. We had to really turn on our ears to hear. I'm sure she did, too, though. And she said, "Well, I saw this on the internet." So, you know, I thought, great, we are getting our word out with our Facebook and our website and, you know, all those Instagram and all those sort of things. So we were thrilled about that. Then she said, "You know, I sense a lot of healing that took place in making these quilts. I've never seen art quilts like this," and we'll show you a few in a minute. But she said, "I think I'd like to try to make these because I sure have a lot of healing to do." She just opened her heart to a perfect strangers. And quilts just touch you so. But I finally said, "Well, where were you in town working?" And she said, "Oh, in Columbus." And she had come out of the way from Columbus here to see this exhibit, in our museum.
And you mentioned the art quilts. I guess that's, I mean, maybe in the last 5 years, was kind of a new concept to me. I grew up, my mother, I mean, she would make quilts, you know, just a ragamuffin fabric. I mean, I can remember some of them in the styles. I mean, little squares like that big, and maybe have 50 squares. And my stepmother, you know, I was telling you too, she owns a loom, and she's always been interested in that as well. So I was, to hear you talk about art, you know, turning these into art was kind of a, you know, not that it's unrealistic and not that I'm blown away, but it was just a new concept to consider it that way.
Would you like to see a few from Sacred
I would
Threads?
love for you to. Is that the current exhibit?
This is the current exhibit, and it's on this weekend and next week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, 10 to 4, that we are open. Now, if there's a group that wants to come, we are happy to open the doors anytime if they'll just call and make arrangements. This one that's being held up now by Jane is called Cairo. All of these quilts, the 37 that are here, are based on 7 different human experiences: brotherhood, grief, healing, joy, inspiration, peace, and spirituality. And sometimes it covers more than one topic. This one was, a lady did this as like a manuscript piece, like the ancient monks used to do. The stitching in it is incredible. The details are just amazing. I don't know if they can zoom in on a few of these details. The quilting varies so much. It's meticulously, beautifully rendered. But she said as she did this, she felt like she was in a prayerful state at all times because it was such a spiritual experience for her. The next one, and Chi and Rho are the first 2 letters in the name Jesus. Now, this one is called Joy, and you certainly see why.
Yeah, immediately. Sure.
This lady has in her town, can you see where this quilt is from, Jane? All of them are from all over the United States. This is a national, actually international traveling show. This lady in Sheridan, Wyoming, sees a statue in front of a library, and it's this joyful little girl. So she decided to add this to into a quilt to express the joy, but of course added a few embellishments and gorgeous colors. So this is such a happy one. I think it makes everybody feel wonderful. And then there's some that are involving grief and healing, and it's such a positive experience to see these people and their reactions. This one's called Hope, and it is about a lady who lost her sister, and she thought she was well and thought everything was fine, but her cancer came back, and in the middle of making this quilt was when her sister died. And she realized the flowers, the early flowers in the snow, gave her that hope and that joy, and reminded her of her sister and that she would see her again. So they're pretty emotional, and they're pretty profound.
And we can't have you show every single one of them because then people will be like, well,
No, there are 37 of them. But here's some quotes from Sacred Threads. This is Susan White Smith. The Sacred Threads quilts will bring you to tears when you hear the stories. Looking at them, studying them, is like being in an art gallery, which is where they belong. They are truly art. I think that sums it up very nicely.
We're speaking with a handful of young ladies from the Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum. Are there more?
Oh, yes, yes.
Are you volunteers?
We have 12
museum?
on our board. All of us are on the board of directors. And we have many people that are involved with the volunteers and being docents and helping with kids camp, teach, and helping with our opening receptions. And then we just have people that are interested that come.
Well, we'll talk about a future
Sure.
exhibit, and also the kids camp, which sounds pretty interesting
Yes.
as well. Remember, this morning we are on Facebook Live, so if you'd like to see some of these quilts, again, we had 3 on display so far, and I think we might sneak a couple more in there in the next segment. But, of course, you can comment on our Facebook Live page if you have questions or comments. You might have a question that I don't tackle that you'd like me to ask the ladies this morning. Kim Power has already checked in, and she says these ladies do beautiful work. Visit the museum and take a look.
Yay!
So, we'll take our first break and come back in just 1 minute. Community Voice brought to you by Tanner Health System here on News Talk 1330 WLBB.
At Tanner, we're advancing health throughout West Georgia and East Alabama, because we know that exceptional care isn't based on how many patients we serve, but how well we serve them. That's why we're focused on quality, delivering the best possible care for our patients. It's why we're expanding our clinical services and building new facilities to serve our growing community. And it's why we're looking beyond our hospitals and medical practices to develop sustainable wellness and preventive health programs in our region. What makes a hospital great has changed. It's not how many beds we have. It's how well we care for the neighbors who need them. Delivering the right care to every patient, every time, is how Tanner is advancing health with medicine beyond measure. Learn more at tanner.org or find a physician on our medical staff by calling 770-214-CARE.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the WLBB Community Voice program. Our show brought to you by Tanner Health System, News Talk 1330 FM 106.3, just about 17 minutes before 9 o'clock. I'm your host, Colin Worthington, sitting down with representatives from the Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum, about to celebrate 6 years, 6-year anniversary in September, I believe we mentioned, and talking about a current exhibit. There was one little poster that, we had a conversation out in the lobby before we did the program, and I'm glad we can bring that back and take a picture. And Marlyn, if you wouldn't mind sharing the story behind this picture. I mean, you can look at it and have your own idea of what it means just by looking at it, and you're not too far off, I don't think.
An emergency room physician in Cortland, New York, wanted to honor her sister after her sister died of cancer. Her sister was a master gardener, and every morning she would get up and sit on her back deck in this rocking chair and look at her garden. Well, she was a very free planting gardener, and this pot of ivy just overtook the chair as the sister was not able to go out any longer during the disease, and she couldn't go out to her chair every morning.
Less traveled, less sat upon.
Yes. And the physician was just so heartbroken. She felt like that was the representative of the cancer taking her sister's body away. But then she came back after losing her sister and looked at the garden and the free-flowing and the plants everywhere, and she realized what a free-form planter her sister was and how she loved everything to be in abundance. And so then she began to see that pot of ivy as a wonderful memento of her sister. So she did this, and she dyed some of her own fabrics, and you can see some of them, but in the window panes, when she finished, she looked back and she felt like she could see a face looking at her. So it was very pointed.
And if you go to the museum, you'll be able
Poignant.
to have a better look at that face. Actually,
Right.
from this angle, I see a lot better than I saw it sitting straight on, the face that you're talking
that's
about.
interesting.
Well, this is a good representative again of the quilts that are in this current exhibit of quilts expressing life's journeys, and that is a go through the end of this month. Is that one? This one, and then a new one starts in July. You guys, we talk about getting kids involved in this, and I think you had a couple of camps. Maybe there's one that's even going on right now for kids.
Not at this
They
moment.
missed out.
We started children's quilting camps in 2015, and each summer we have a camp for children to learn to make a quilt because they're interested in creating.
Why are they
things
interested in the quilts?
It's
How do they-
hands-on.
yeah.
Children like manipulative things. And each camp has instructors from the West Georgia Quilters Guild who serve as mentors. We have a mentor with each child. The museum has developed the curriculum, provides the materials, provides the tools for them to work with. We have purchased sewing machines for the children to use so they can make their own quilt and do a wonderful job doing it in 1 week's time. We have intermediate students, we have beginning students, and this year we're having an advanced camp, and Sarah is in charge of the advanced camp this summer.
When we see the advanced camp, have those kids participated in the previous two camps, you think? Or
Yes, usually the students who are in advanced classes have taken at least 3 different classes with us previously.
are they seeing interest from their parents turning them on to quilting, period, or quilting just happened to be the way that they can express themselves?
Well, the parents sign them up for
Sign
the
up for it,
camp, but the children come and find that they really enjoy creating. They are making something that is their own. And we teach them to document their quilt with their name and the year that they made it. And they're very proud of what they've done.
Sure.
I brought some quilts that children have made to show, and we're very proud of what they've done.
Well, perhaps our camera guru, Joel Brock, can take a peek at those. Now, how recent are these quilts?
These were made this year.
Like 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
That one was, and this one.
Yeah, I
These
need
are
you to talk straight.
intermediate students.
What age are they?
These girls were 8.
Still very sharp.
8
Absolutely.
years old. This one was made.
Need you to talk to the mic there, Ginny. Straight into the mic. Yeah.
This one was made last summer. It's a work in progress. The young lady's still working on that one.
Do the sizes mean anything? I mean, is there a reason why one might be smaller than the other?
The smaller examples are the first year students. When they're older and we can give them more complicated designs to work with, they can make a larger quilt. This one was made by an intermediate student.
And honestly, that looks like one that my mom would have made, just with with leftover. Not to suggest that's leftover fabric, but I mean the little squares and things. She would put those, but we would sleep in them.
Right.
Yeah, but you guys aren't sleeping in these, are you? They're more for art. They're
Well,
some of these are.
These, I was told by the mother who got me this quilt to bring in today that she took it off her daughter who was sleeping underneath it last night.
well, she had to be very proud of it, though, too. So.
Pardon?
She's probably very, very proud of it.
Oh,
too.
they're very proud of it. Some use it as a wall hanging. Some use it on their bed. But they're very proud to show it off.
Do you know when the next opportunity is for?
Yes, in July we have 2 sessions of quilt camp coming up, the 15th through the 20th. Both of those sessions are filled, so we will not have another children's camp available until next summer.
Well, interesting to see that they are filling up. As far as the used patterns, I guess thinking back to the '80s when I remember my mom doing that. I remember these little like paper patterns, right? They'd come in little cardboard or little paper boxes, and you pull those patterns out. Is it kind of the same? Do they still use those now, or is that?
Some
I
these
imagine
are.
it's all digital and computer prints it all out. Basically. No.
We teach the children to use tools to make the quilts, not just scissors, but rotary cutters, and we have all of those tools available for them. The museum owns the tools, and the children can use these high-quality tools to make their creation.
Well, very good. We've got about 10 minutes left in our program, so we're going to take our final break as we speak with representatives from the Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum. We've got Ginny, Jane, Cyndi, Sarah, and Marlyn with us, and we've got Harrison sitting on the couch in the other room as well. We'll take our final break and come back with about 9 minutes left in our program this morning. Community Voice brought to you by Tanner Health System here on News Talk 1330 FM 106.3.
At Tanner, we're advancing health throughout West Georgia and East Alabama because we know that exceptional care isn't based on how many patients we serve, but how well we serve them. That's why we're focused on quality, delivering the best possible care for our patients. It's why we're expanding our clinical services and building new facilities to serve our growing community. And it's why we're looking beyond our hospitals and medical practices to develop sustainable wellness and preventive health programs in our region. What makes a hospital great has changed. It's not how many beds we have. It's how well we care for the neighbors who need them. Delivering the right care to every patient, every time, is how Tanner is advancing health with medicine beyond measure. Learn more at tanner.org or find a physician on our medical staff by calling 770-214-CARE.
All right, welcome back to the WLBB Community Voice program. Our show brought to you by Tanner Health System, News Talk 1330 FM 106.3. Also streaming live on the internet at newstalk1330.com. And this morning, we are on Facebook Live. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, you're getting to see some of these beautiful quilts that we're talking about and get the backstory. I'm sure we'll show a few more here within the next 5 minutes or so as we talk about the upcoming exhibit. The current exhibit, I believe it ends at the end of this month, and then there's a week break where they kind of rearrange everything and set everything up, and then we'll have a new exhibit in July, and we'll talk about that. As far as there was something that we wanted to talk about in the last segment, we kind of forgot about. I guess for the advanced students, where they're taking more steps now to be part of or to painting these quilts. I mean, they're getting to dye the fabric now, right?
Correct. Usually our advanced camp has just more complicated techniques, but personally I've sort of explored dyeing fabrics and painting fabrics, and I felt like that's something that the younger girls would really enjoy being creative with. So what we're holding up are some examples of what is called ice dyeing. You use ice and powdered dyes and layer those and make your own fabric. So this was white fabric that was dyed. The pink and white was using 2 different dyes. The other one was using about 3 different colors. And then the little pouch is one of the projects that we're going to be making during the advanced camp. The girls will make a zipper pouch. They will also do something we call improvisational quilting, where there is not a pattern, and you might not use a rotary cutter. You might use scissors or, another way of tearing fabric, just sort of like thinking outside the box. And also we will be making a block that is a house, so they get to design their own block. They're going to build a house, make a house, a tree, and if they have time, they're going to make a little mini quilt to hang on the clothesline. So just a way that they can be creative as they play around with fabric.
Absolutely. Before we move on to that next exhibit, this was kind of a selfish question, and I'm sure you guys hear it all the time. I do have 2 quilts. One of them is actually made out of beer mats from England that I brought back like 20 years ago. I mean, they're I don't know, 2 foot by a half foot. And my stepmother actually made a giant quilt out of all those, and which is pretty sharp. And I also have another one for old rock and roll T-shirts. And I hear a lot of people want to do those as well. Is there somebody local that does that? Is there somebody who
Funny you should ask. We have had a class making T-shirt quilts. That is something that I do for clients, and memory quilts. So it's taking people's clothes. And it could be a child's first year's clothing. It could be a loved one who has passed, and just using those fabrics. So those are the kinds of classes that we teach for adults. We've had a memory quilt class recently, and I think our T-shirt quilt class was last summer.
And it's not something easy to jump into. I think you want somebody to train you, because I've actually sat down there and thought about cutting them out and the logos that I want and how I want to put it. But when you think about just how thin those shirts can be, especially after like 10 years, and they're all worn out. I mean, there's got to be a
Yes.
strategy to it and backing and all that stuff. So,
Right.
So I'm seeking a professional. Perhaps we will.
Yeah, good
perhaps I'll
reason.
take
Come
the
to
class.
class.
When
Yeah,
is
come
when is
to the
that class?
class.
When is that class?
Well, we've just had those.
Oh, I missed them.
We will have some more adult
All right.
classes.
Yeah, I'll
Right.
keep you posted.
Yes.
We'll have to make that happen. We've got about 5 minutes left in the program, so let us talk about the next exhibit, which is coming up in July.
Yes. Our next exhibit features the works of Flavin Glover, who is a quilter and teacher out of Auburn, Alabama. She is known nationally and internationally, has published books on quilting, and there was a question earlier, where do we get our patterns? And these days, sometimes we just purchase a book and look and say, oh, it tells you how to cut it, how to piece it, how to put it together, and so forth. The quilt is featured on the cover of this book, was selected as one of the 100 best quilts of the 20th century.
That's not too shabby.
Right. So it's really exciting for us that she is also excited about being able to display her work at the Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum. The title of that exhibit is Color the Design Element with Punch. It will open on July 12th and will be open through the end of September.
We have about 3 minutes left in the program. I guess briefly before, we'll try and give all the specifics about your opening and your times and things like that, and the address one more time. What can somebody expect as they do come in? I mean, what I guess, how else are you pulled into the exhibits? I mean, it's more than just having the quilts on the wall, right? I thought you guys had an interactive thing or something, or maybe you were working on that or something like that.
There's an interactive component to the current exhibit.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, where they can call into a telephone number, and the person who made the quilt will tell you why they made it, and the story behind it.
Very sharp. Now, this other one, as far as visiting this and bringing in families and bringing in groups for the new exhibit, the one starts in July, how much time should somebody expect to spend there to be able to take in everything that's on display?
It depends on the level of interest. Some of our visitors spend 10 minutes, and some will spend an hour or two.
Sacred Threads, if you do listen to all of the artists on your telephone, it's probably an hour and 20 minutes to an hour and a half.
How about you?
And it is the level of interest.
Is the museum air conditioned?
Oh, yes.
Well, there you go. That's
And
enough
heated.
reason. Yeah.
And
Very
heated.
important.
Yeah.
That's
We have 3 rooms right now that we have displays in all 3 rooms. And then we also have a gift shop. And our gift shop has all handmade items, unique and fun. And we are a Blue Star Museum, which means throughout the summer, anyone in the Army and their the military services and their families are welcomed free of charge. That is just something we think is very important.
Absolutely.
We're excited. And we're also a member of the American Alliance of Museums.
We have 2 minutes left, ladies. Actually, less than that. So give us the times again, and address and contact information. Also, you have a website too. People can visit that and get some more information on upcoming
Absolutely,
exhibits.
Southeastern
And
Quilt and
Facebook. And Instagram.
Right, Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum.net, and .org. There we go. You can tell I'm not in charge of that. That's not my forte. But to remind you, we're at 306 Bradley Street in Carrollton. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we're open 10 until 4. And we keep hearing this over and over. The more technology there is in a community, the more creative opportunities we need. So this gives a balance to the things that we are seeking in our community, the technology that all of our kids are learning in school and that we use every day. We are getting into so much automation that we need those creative outlets to make our brains happy.
And if any of our listeners want to be able to maybe just participate more, just be hanging out more with the quilt ladies and stuff like that, they can do that and contact and volunteer and be part of the museum, right?
We would love to have them. We welcome everyone, and we're having a men's exhibit in the fall where all the quilts will have been made by men. So stay tuned.
Well, absolutely. We'll try and talk about
Thank
that
you so
later
much,
on.
Colin, for
Ginny,
having us.
Jane, Cyndi, Sarah, Marlyn, and Harrison, thank you for joining us today. And thanks for listening to the Community Voice program here on News Talk 1330 FM 106.3.